Well, I mean, if you want to achieve all the goals and targets of the SDG and of the Agenda 2030, there are so many policies you have to implement in education, in equality, health, whatsoever. I think what is more important is that the Agenda 2030 is an opportunity to do politics differently. Because what the Agenda 2030 is about and what everybody insists on is that all the goals are interconnected. So the agenda is indivisible. This means that when you now do a policy on agriculture, for example, you do not only have to take into account the competitiveness of the sector, you have to take into account the impact on biodiversity, you have to take into account the impact on other countries. So the Agenda 2030 is an opportunity for governments, also but for NGOs, just to work across the silos, to avoid sectoral thinking. And I think this is what is most important about the SDGs. National governments are accountable for the Agenda 2030. But I think maybe the most important is the role NGOs have to play for the Agenda 2030. They can use all the goals, targets, and indicators of the agenda just to track the progress of their countries, to hold them accountable for what they committed to. I mean, countries have committed to so many things inside the Agenda 2030, some targets which will be very difficult to achieve. So the role of NGO is to hold the governments accountable. And also I think because the SDGs are universal, it's an opportunity for them to go across the borders and to forge new coalition of NGOs on inequalities, for example, working with NGOs in China, in Sweden, or in Brazil. And finally, still for NGOs, because the Agenda 2030 is indivisible, this means it's an opportunity for them to build new coalition in Spain, for example, just for development NGOs to work with social NGOs, to work with environmental NGOs. We criticize a lot the governments because they work in silos, but I fear it is the same also for NGOs. So the Agenda 2030 is a call to NGOs also to work across the silo and to work all together to be more powerful, to have more impact on the political debate. Well, the main problem we have in France right now about the Agenda 2030 is that few people know about this agenda. All the NGOs working on development know about SDGs, for example, because this is a continuation of MDGs for them, the Millennium Development Goals. The ministry in charge of foreign affairs or in charge of cooperation policies know about the SDGs. But if you ask to a Ministry of Education, Health, Finance, if they know about SDGs, well, they do not really know. If you ask to a climate NGO or to an NGO working on poverty reduction, if they know about SDGs, well, they have heard about it, but they do not plan to do anything about that. So I think the main challenge we have now in France is for everybody to understand that the Agenda 2030 is not only an agenda for developing countries, but it's also an agenda for France.